Hello and welcome to Business Daily on Trust Television. On this program, we are set to give you updates from the Straits of business, finance, the economy, and the stock market. I am your host, Christiana Amodu Otiya. Thank you for joining on the program today. Thrust us to bring you business information that are up to date and factual on Business Daily. Let's begin with the headlines. R2200 policy, non-oil exporters repatriate $4.99 billion forex after 10 months. And now in the agricultural and commodities sector, black pod disease, cocoa output shrinks 15% amid price surge. We'll bring you more on the business roundup segment. However, we'll take a short breather. When we come back, it'll be time to go into updates from the stock market. Please stay. Welcome back. Now let's get straight into the stock market, and we'll begin from the local buzz, talking about Customs Street Nigeria Exchange, Nigeria's commercial hub in Lagos State. Now we saw the Nigeria Exchange chop off 0.24% amid persistent profit-taking activities on the floor of the local buzz. Now we saw investors sold off shares that have appreciated in price during the recovery period. Now looking at the activity levels here for the Nigeria Exchange, the total volume of 120.95 million shares valued at 1.65 billion naira changed hands in 3,022 deals on the local buzz. Now the equity caps settled at 25.83 trillion naira. Let's go over to other African buzzes, talking about Africa's largest stock exchange, the JSE, and in Ghana, the Ghanaian buzz also. We are seeing a positive close here for the markets. The JSE is up 0.69% and the GSE is up 0.03%. In South Africa, however, the focus is on economic data, and market watchers are looking at South Africa's unemployment rate, which is more than expected at 1.5-year high of 32.9%. Now, a lot of experts have said this is reflecting the fragility of the South Africa's economy. Remember, South Africa's power utility company, Eskom, has been embattled for some time now, and there's been a whole lot of load shedding going on there, and how that is equally affecting economic productivity in South Africa. Let's go over now to Wall Street in the United States and see what the numbers are looking like. Now, we are seeing more of a red close for the markets here in the U.S. Now, the S&P 500 and the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite shared 0.59% and 0.16% respectively. However, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, we are seeing a marginal increase there, 0.01%. So we have two reds here and one green in the U.S. Let's go over to the European Strait and see what's happening there. European markets were cautiously higher Wednesday, especially as regional investors monitor latest inflation data in the Eurozone. And also markets are keenly watching for cues from the Jerome Powell speech. That's the head of the Federal Reserve in the U.S. He's expected to speak at the Brookings Institution, and a lot of focus is on that speech. What is going to be the stance for the U.S. monetary policy? So that's really the focus for markets and investors now. We are seeing from the FTSE 100 in the UK to the CAC in France and the DAX in Germany. Also in France, talking about the CAC 40, inflation numbers also have come out for France, and investors there are also looking keenly as to how that will direct economic policies in the French country. Now going over to Asia Pacific region, stocks were of course mostly higher. However, Nikkei 225 in Japan there is down 0.21%. In mainland China, the Shanghai Composite is up 0.05%, and the Kospi in South Korea is up 1.61%. Going over now to the commodities market, what's the chart looking like? So it's really a lot of green going on here for the commodities market. The only red here, as you can see from this last bit, is for cocoa. And remember, I said we're going to talk more, give you more update from the cocoa market. Now, the black pod disease is really affecting output from the cocoa market, and demand is increasing, but a lot of farmers are unable to meet up with this demand as a result of some of these challenges they are facing. Now, cocoa is down 0.21%. However, from Brent crude, international benchmark for crude oil, to the bullion, gold, to silver, to palm palm oil and to wheat. All these numbers are in the green zone, 1.08% higher, 0.31, 0.37, 0.47 and 0.41% higher there respectively. However, we are seeing some red coming for the cocoa market. Going over now to crypto, watch some of the cryptocurrency we watch for you on the program. Bitcoin now touched a little bit above the $70,000 mark, but we are seeing a climb of 2.59% there, 16,886. Now, the market is still trying to keep its head above the murky waters that came with the announcement from FTX, and we're seeing some level of stability return back to the cryptocurrency market. Ethereum is at $1,272.90, and the Binance coin has climbed up back. Recall that throughout last week we saw the coin stay below the $300 mark, where we are seeing some steam returning back to the Binance coin. $300, they're up 1.32%. These are the numbers we have to crunch for you on the program today. Of course, we'll continue to monitor the markets in coming days and see how the market is going to culminate, especially for the week. Are the bears or the bulls going to dominate? Trust us to bring you those updates on Business Daily. However, it's time to bring you a roundup of business stories. Take a listen.
Nigeria's non-oil exporters have repatriated a total of $4.99 billion, 10 months after the introduction of the RT200 initiative by the Central Bank of Nigeria. This is 56.43% higher than the $3.190 billion repatriated in 2021 before the policy. Governor of the CBN, Godwin Emefiele, disclosed this on Tuesday at the second edition of the RT200 biannual conference in Lagos. He said $1.966 billion of the total sum qualified for the rebate program, but only $1.559 billion was sold at the investors and exporters forex window or for own use. Recounting the achievement of the industry since the first conference in June of 2022, he said in terms of processes and infrastructure for improving trade performance, the sector recorded some achievements in automation and digitization of the trade processes. Nigeria's 2021-2022 cocoa main crop output is seen shrinking by 15% as fungal black pot disease attacked farms. This is following the flooding incidences and heavy rainfall in the main producing areas. National President of the Cocoa Association of Nigeria, Mufutau Abolarinwa, who disclosed this, said the season was delayed by 2 weeks and a scramble for quality cocoa beans has pushed the prices of the commodity higher as floods ravaged farmlands in Taraba and Cross River states. An analysis puts the prices of cocoa, Nigeria's flagship export produce, having surged by 77% this year. The main crop accounts for about 70% of Nigeria's cocoa output, while the mid-crop accounts for 30% of the total production for the season. Nigeria is the world's fourth top grower of cocoa with 250,000 metric tons, the ICCO said in its third quarter bulletin, and a 15% decline means the output will dip by 37,500 metric tons. According to the Cocoa Research Institute of Nigeria, black pod, a fungi disease, thrives in wet conditions on cocoa farms due to incessant rains. According to the Cocoa Research Institute of Nigeria, black pod, a fungi disease, thrives in wet conditions on cocoa farms due to incessant rains without adequate sunshine.
Welcome back. Now that's a roundup of business stories. Our focus on the program today will be on the entrepreneurship landscape in Nigeria. Now, a lot of the entrepreneurship and MSME subsector now have been tagged the engine room that the economy of a nation runs on. Basically, now these sector, those that play in this sector, how are they thriving? What's the landscape like? Especially looking at the policy thrust we have seen so far. Access to finance remains also a major issue for those that play in the entrepreneurship sector. I will be joined on the program today by Amaka Nwokolo, who is the head Fate Institute. I will be looking at some of the matters that have come up, especially for the entrepreneurship sector, and also the 2022 entrepreneurship, the State of Entrepreneurship report. Now, I'll be giving details of that report shortly. However, I'll hold on my horses here and take a short break. When we return, Business Daily continues. Please stay with us.
That's great. That's good to see.
Welcome back to the program, and thank you for still staying there with us. If you're just tuning in, of course, you've missed the part where we really talk about the stock market and give you updates from the stock market if you're interested in that market. However, we're getting into the conversation segment of the program right about now. And like I stated earlier, my guest is joining me. She's Amaka Wokolo, the head Faith Institute, and our focus is on the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Nigeria. Basically, how are entrepreneurs doing? What is the state of that sector? Now, I'll give some major highlights of the 2022 State of Entrepreneurship report. Now, according to that report, 8,611 businesses were surveyed across the 36 states of Nigeria, including the Federal Capital Territory. More than half of the entrepreneurs surveyed, 51%, were aged 30 to 39. Male-led businesses stood at 61%, with female-led businesses being 39%. Interesting there. 80% of the businesses surveyed were either nano, 41%, or micro, 39% businesses. Perception of opportunities ranked highest on the entrepreneurial index, and enabling environment ranked the lowest. Now, Imo State ranked the highest with a score of 0.82, followed by Bauchi State 0.72, Delta State 0.70, Gombe and Plateau States both at 0.69. Now, at the lower Kada, Kogi and Taraba States and the FCT ranked overall lowest with the index score of 0.40. Personal savings were cited. Now, looking at issues around finance, personal savings cited as main source of finance by 74% of entrepreneurs, followed by family and friends at 37%. Now, only 19% of entrepreneurs receive finance from commercial banks. Commercial banks' credit to private sector in 2021 was 22 trillion naira, but only 0.38% of this credit was disbursed to small businesses. It's time to bring in my guest for the program today. She's Amaka Wokolo. And Amaka Wokolo will be speaking to some of these issues that we have raised up because, like I mentioned earlier, Nigeria is domiciled to over 40 million players in the MSME sector. And these players create basically the level of economic productivity that is expected for the sector. Now, what is when there's an engine of a vehicle, there's an oil that's supposed to service that engine. Now, for the sector, the oil tends to be issues around finance and regulation. What is the state of all of that happening currently for that sector? Because looking at this data I just churned out, now this is one interesting part for me in the data is 80% of the businesses were either nano or micro. So these businesses are still within the nano and micro level. What happens to the macro businesses? Why are they not also evolving to become macro businesses? These are some of the issues that we'll be x-raying. And something really struck me there. Male-led businesses stood at 61%, with female-led businesses being 39%. Because a lot of people will tell you that we're good, that there's a perception that women do business more. But this is also telling us that that might not be the case. That's what this report is currently telling us, that might not be the case for these businesses. So I have Amaka Wokolo now joining me, the head Faith Institute, and she's joining me to speak to some of these developments. Welcome to the program, Amaka.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to have you. It's great to be here, rather. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you for joining us. Now, interesting insights from the State of Entrepreneurship report. But before we delve into that proper, I want to have your thoughts. Now, you monitor entrepreneurship in Nigeria. You speak with entrepreneurs. What is really the state of those that play in that sector, or the state of the landscape currently?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christy. It's great to be here again. I think I would start by just briefly talking about how the ecosystem has evolved, over the years. And what we're seeing is that we find that you have a lot more young people playing within the space. And this is actually very evident when you think of young people who are running businesses right from secondary or tertiary institutions, and honing their entrepreneurial skills in the process. And so when you look at the entrepreneurship landscape in Nigeria today, there's so much happening, and so much has evolved over the years, right? So for example, we have more players within the space who are also providing business support, who are providing capacity building and even funding. So for example, I would think of the banks, the banking institutions who, for most of the banks today, you'll find that everyone is designing some form of financial product, for entrepreneurs specifically, and also providing some form of capacity building or some form of business support, right? You also do find that you have religious bodies also towing, that path, come jumping on the bandwagon as well, providing advisory, capacity building, business supports, and all of that. And so when we look at the entrepreneurship landscape, the ecosystem is not without its challenges, because as we'll probably talk about as we get more into the conversation, there are challenges within the ecosystem, but generally the ecosystem is growing, it's evolving. And the last point I'll probably share would be around technology. When we look at technology adoption and what is happening within the ecosystem, when we think of startups like, the Flutter Waves, the Thrive for Greeks, the Health Reliance, and all of that. And these startups are able to pull in funding in the hundreds of millions of dollars, right? A very interesting fact is that as of last year, we had 5 of the 7 unicorns in Africa, 5 of them from Nigeria alone. So this just goes to show that so much is happening within the space. The space is growing, the space is evolving. But again, like I mentioned, it's not without its challenges.
Okay, I want you to speak to some of the findings for the State of Entrepreneurship report. We just listed some of the key highlights from that report. I want you to speak to some of those findings.
Okay, so last year we launched our flagship report, the State of Entrepreneurship report. And then this year, what we did was to put out the 2022 version. And we surveyed over 8,600 businesses across the 36 states in Nigeria, including the FCT. Now, more than half of these businesses are aged between 30 and 39. And that also goes to show, we find within the ecosystem. Prior to now, we used to think, most of the entrepreneurs within the ecosystem are pretty young, very young, cap being at 35, so 18 to 35. But what we're finding is we're saying that we have a lot more people within the age bracket of 30 to 39 running businesses. And that could be as a result of the unemployment situation. So that could be because more people don't have jobs and so are running businesses or floating new businesses. But notwithstanding, we still do have young people playing within the space, because we had 29% of the businesses surveyed, aged between 15 and 19%. Now, when we talk about gender, when we're talking about female-led businesses, male-led businesses, what are we seeing in that regard or in that category? This year, we had 61% of the businesses surveyed being male-led and 39 being female-led. Now, this is not an improvement from what we had last year, because last year we had 43% of female-led businesses, of businesses being female-led. But then that also goes to show that, there's still room for improvement, particularly with regards to designing policies that are gender focused, or policies that utilize a gender lens approach around that. Now, for 80% of the businesses that were surveyed, most of them fall between the micro and nano segment. So as much as we have a lot of MSMEs or micro, small and medium enterprises playing within the space, majority of them still operate at the micro and nano level, meaning there's a lot of work that needs to be done to be able to encourage these businesses to grow. Because when the businesses grow, that's when we begin to see impact in terms of job creation and in terms of contribution to GDP. Interestingly, half of the businesses that we surveyed were 5 years or less. and 32% of the businesses that we surveyed were created in the last year alone. And that for me just sort of emphasizes the entrepreneurial drive of the Nigerian people, because despite the challenges and the issues, you have people still floating businesses within the space. The highlight of the State of the Entrepreneurship report is the entrepreneurial entrepreneurial performance across states, right? And we use 5 defined indicators. One would be business performance. The second would be skills acquisition. The third would be technology and innovation. The fourth will be perception of opportunities, and then we have the enabling environment. Generally, Nigeria's performance was about 0.58 out of 1.0, which is a slight improvement above average. But then what we also did find was that across states, we did discover that Imo State was doing really well. So Imo State had a ranking of 0.82, followed by Bauchi, followed by Delta, and other states. For the second time in a row, we do have perception of opportunities ranking high or ranking the highest on the index with 0.80. That really just goes to show that despite the issues and the challenges, again, within the ecosystem, a lot of Nigerian entrepreneurs are very optimistic about the future of their businesses and about opportunities and growth capacity within the ecosystem.
Okay, I want to come in here now, Amaka.
So we have enabling environments ranking the lowest. And this really just re-emphasizes the issues that we have around the enabling environments in Nigeria. Okay. So in a nutshell, that's what we have.
Okay. Now, quite insightful there. But I want you to speak to, because most times when I have conversations with those that are both from public and private sector, and they speak to developments in the entrepreneurship sector, you mentioned that there are still challenges that are bound in the sector. I want you to speak to issues around access to finance and how we can bridge the finance gap before I ask you my final question.
Okay, so access to finance is definitely one of the major challenges facing a lot of entrepreneurs within the ecosystem. From our survey, it's interesting that despite all of the interventions and programs that have been introduced, both by the government and by players across private and development sectors, we find that 74% of the entrepreneurs' personal savings was their biggest and main source of finance for their businesses, right? This was closely followed by family and friends, not closely actually, because family and friends came in at 37%. So majority of entrepreneurs actually raise money from their personal savings. Now, for institutional sources, we did find that cooperative societies ranked high, followed by microfinance banks, right? However, with everything that's happening within the banking space, only 19% of entrepreneurs were able to access any form of funding or finance from the banks. And that really, again, just goes to show that, there's a lot that needs to be done with regards to bridging the access to finance gap. Now, when we talk about the access to finance gap, there are 2 ways we can look at it, or there are 2 perspectives we can look at it from. One would be the demand side and one would be the supply side, right? For the demand side, there are a lot of issues, around that. And one definitely would be the high cost of borrowing, a low level of trust. A lot of entrepreneurs do not trust the banks, do not trust some of these funding interventions. For example, the government interventions that have been introduced, there's a perception that is introduced for the favorites or those that know people who are in government, and all of that. So there's that low level of trust. But then there's also limited awareness of regulatory initiatives like the movable collateral registry that was designed to be able to sort of mitigate challenges around collateral, because again, collateral is a major issue when you talk about accessing finance. But from our survey, majority of our respondents, 80% of them actually were totally unaware and in the dark of this regulatory initiative, right? When we talk about the supply side challenges, we're talking about limited financial literacy and investor readiness on the part of the entrepreneur. So if you're looking to access funding from a bank or from an investor or from someone who is just even interested in your business, we find that a lot of entrepreneurs still lack that capacity. There's still a gap when it comes to financial literacy and investor readiness knowledge. And so that's definitely a gap that needs to be bridged if we want want to see an uptick in the numbers with regards to bridging the access to finance gap. And so there are a lot of other issues, for example, poor data and insights on credit worthiness. So for example, it would be great for us to leverage technology to sort of create digital footprints for a lot of entrepreneurs. So in a way they can be monitored and they can be tracked, because that way it will be easier to sort of lend or provide funding to an entrepreneur, knowing that this entrepreneur is not going to disappear
so, Amaka,
with the funding.
And
so in a nutshell, these are some of the issues that we're seeing. And some of the
2023.
recommendations definitely would include really just dimensioning and better mapping the sector, the MSME sector, to better understand, what happens within each category. You
Amaka,
have
I don't know
micro
if you
business.
can hear me from your end.
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me?
The time is actually against us now in this conversation.
Okay.
So in one word, I just want to get your forecast for the year 2023 for the entrepreneurship landscape in Nigeria. Just one word. I know I'm boxing you into a corner, but just one word.
Right. In one word, we're very optimistic. The perception of opportunities index showed that over 80% of entrepreneurs are very positive about the next year. So we're also positive about the next year and the possibility of entrepreneurs growing their businesses in the new year.
Amaka Nwokolo there. Thank you. So your one word is optimism. So I'm going to hold you on to that. Thank you, Amaka Nwokolo, Head Faith Institute, for coming on the program and sharing your thoughts on the entrepreneurship landscape in Nigeria. And that's where we draw the curtains for the program today. Thank you for investing your time with us on the program. Remember, you can catch up on all daily updates in the world of business and news making the polity on our social media platforms. I am your host, Christiana Amodu Otinya. Continue to stay resilient as an entrepreneur and continue to stay safe.